If you think the price of eggs is bad, where do you get a load of some of these ticket prices for watching the Georgia Bulldogs play football this season? Dean Legge from Dawg Post. I went through and looked at the most expensive games for 2025, and guess who's on the list? Constantly, the Georgia Bulldogs. The most expensive game in 2025. This is secondary markets. This is not from the schools themselves. The most expensive game this season is Texas at Georgia. That is the most expensive game. I don't know if it's the only game with two teams that played in the playoff, but it is one of the 9 most expensive games this season. I'm going to go through them with you right now and put them on the screen as I go. Texas at Georgia, $566 just to get in. Not to be on the field with me, be in the press box with Matt and Ryan. To get into the stadium is $566. I'm going to kind of go scattered here just a little bit here too, okay? If you want to watch the Deep South's oldest rivalry at Auburn, this game is at Auburn, that's $275 to watch Georgia play at Auburn. Ole Miss coming to Athens, second time in 3 years, that is $297, so almost $300 for both those games for one ticket. Georgia at Neyland to play the Tennessee Vols. Really the first real test of the season for Georgia. $338 for that game. And then, this is going to be a big one too. This is number 3 game this season coming into it. At $465 get-in price is Alabama at Georgia. Now, what's happening during all these games is that, it's February right now. And, as you saw with the Super Bowl tickets, they go down over time typically. But if you want to lock it in, like if you're a Texas fan and you're trying to go to Georgia, that's probably easier, I would say, than going to Austin. Just my take, it's not easy to fly into Austin, and you got to go to Dallas. Dallas is 3 hours, Houston's 3 hours, San Antonio's closer, but nothing's real close to Austin necessarily. You can fly to the Atlanta airport, do your thing in Atlanta. That's one reason why those tickets are so high. Texas has never played in Athens that I recall. Certainly not in recent history. So there's all of these games, man. There, which one would you pick? Would you do Auburn, Georgia at Auburn, $275? Ole Miss at Georgia, $297. Georgia at Tennessee, $338. Bama at Georgia, $465. Or Texas at Georgia, $566. These are more expensive. All of them are more expensive than it costs to get into the Sugar Bowl against Notre Dame in a quarterfinal game, which is astonishing to me. But that's where we're at. That's where we're at these days. It's an amazing time in the sports world, and I would say that you'd better be ready to spend if you're going to go watch these dogs. I'm going to tell you that right now. Our buddies at BetMGM have a great offer for you today. Use the promo code MEGABET, MEGABET. The code, this link is right down below to get a chance to get off $1,500 in bonus bets for if your first bet does not win. Let me read that a little bit better. Use the code MEGABET and get the chance to get up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. And these weekends in Athens are going to be crazy. So Auburn, Georgia in Athens is always a pretty big weekend. Ole Miss has become a really big weekend because the schools never play. There's a lot of crossover there, but Texas, Georgia, and Athens, that's going to be a pretty huge matchup. That could be number 1 versus number 2. I doubt it, but we'll see. And then Alabama at Georgia, that could be number 1 versus 2. I really doubt that, but we'll just see. Let me go through some of these other games here that are, what's kind of shocking to me is that the Ohio State-Texas game was not as expensive, perhaps as you would think it would be. You're talking about, that's the season opener for these two schools. And, that game was not as high as Texas-Georgia. Like that to me is pretty astonishing. That game wouldn't be a lot higher. It is only at $282. So if you want to watch Ole Miss Georgia, that's more expensive than Ohio State Texas. Now, you can explain that to me some way. I'm not sure I know the answer to that, but whatever. There's a couple other more interesting games on here too. Alabama's on this list quite a bit. So the top 10 games, I'm going to mention all of them right now. I'm not going to go in order necessarily, but Ohio State, Michigan, $495. That game is at Michigan this season. Slightly larger stadium, not by a lot. Texas A&M at Texas. That game's not been played in Austin in over a decade. $463 to get in price there. Red River Rivalry for Texas and OU. That game's going to be at $439. So Texas has four of the top six games that they play are the most expensive ticket. Georgia has 5 of the top 10. So, after a while, Texas ran out of big games to play. Alabama and Florida State open the season with one another. Would you go to that game? That game is at Doak Campbell, $421. I would normally say if that was Nick Saban's club, they'd go down there and throttle Florida State. These two teams are both in not a great position right now, comparatively speaking to their 2024 seasons or their 2014 seasons too. Almost said that. And then of course we said Georgia at Tennessee, $338. That will definitely fall. Ole Miss at Georgia, $297. I don't know if that will fall. And then Georgia at Auburn, $275. Auburn is a huge stadium, 87,000 people. I often, and I'm going to show these to y'all one of these days when I get my act together. I walk stadiums, so I go from the bottom of the stadium all the way to the top, and I do it at most places. I did it at Auburn. I've not done it at Bryant-Denny, even though I've been there multiple times. Just keep forgetting to do it there. But Auburn is a huge place, very difficult place to play. It's one of the smaller places that Georgia plays these days in the grand scheme of things. They played at Austin last year, 100,000. Alabama, 100,000. Tennessee, 100,000. How Auburn is not a massive place anymore is crazy because it's not that much smaller, and Georgia's about 7,000 fewer seats in Georgia, and it rocks and rolls. So if you want to see the Deep South's oldest rivalry, that's the one that you got to go pay $275 to get in today. I do want to say, I was thinking about this, thinking about our trip to Los Angeles for SoFi. Dawg Post has been to South Bend, the Rose Bowl, SoFi out in Los Angeles, Indianapolis, the Sugar Bowl 3 times or 4 times, whatever it's been, multiple times. The Orange Bowl multiple times. Georgia's played in Austin. Media Days was in Dallas. In Jacksonville every single season. You think about playing in Lexington, Kentucky, going to Oxford. I was in Fayetteville, Arkansas into the year 2000. It is extremely expensive to go to these games for a season. And, I think that's one thing, just anecdotally talking to people that are fans at Georgia, that Josh Brooks and company have got to keep an eye on or keep the pulse of. And this is even talking with McGill Society folks. It's got to make sense. There's got to be return on the value. Now, for the contributions, if someone's giving, let's just say $170,000 over a 5-year period, something like that, that would get you into McGill Society. There's not a crowd of people that can do that. There's probably a fair amount, but there's not, thousands of people that are going to go 175 over 5 year. Now I could be wrong, but it ain't tens of thousands. We know that, right? So there's only so many of those folks to go around, and you have to wonder, like the sort of common fan, Joe from Moultrie, is he really, or or Joe and his wife, Mary, are they going to continue to give when the schedule is not what they want it to be? The schedule is, they never played Florida and Athens, and they never will. Georgia Tech's going to be asking the same question. So these are all, part of these, what I'm saying here, these are all important issues as we go to the, deeper into this century. We're a quarter of the way through the century. By the time we're a third of the way through the century, college football could change in a way that's even more fundamentally different than it has with NIL and transfer portal if you go to just a straight up 2-division college football world where everything is, we have the same basic rules, we have the same basic this, we have the same basic that. That could be coming in the 2030s. That's very possible. But in the meantime, there's no no offense, there's no real value for Georgia fans to pay the contribution to watch Mississippi State. And I have to say, there's been a lot of times when there's not been real value, and Georgia fans paying, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars for the home schedules that they've had. This past year's was bad, and there's so much you can do about that. When you think about, the Clemson game, they played Clemson, but they played them in Atlanta. They played Florida. Well, they always play Florida in Jacksonville. Auburn, nobody was juiced up for that game for some reason. So it's part of this is the new reality of college football. Part of this is, part of this is where Georgia's at right now. And, if it's not them playing, Florida or Ohio State or Alabama or Texas or someone in that stratosphere, they're not going to be uber excited. If South Carolina were to come to Athens ranked 24, it would not be wild. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. You know what? They can take it however they want. I know that group well, and they know what I'm saying is true. So there's some games that Georgia plays that are better on the road, to be honest with you. South Carolina's one of them. Georgia Tech's one of them. I can't really say that about LSU, but it is wild to go to Death Valley. So that's the challenge for, Jerry Moorhead, for Josh Brooks, to some degree for Kirby Smart. He's just the coach. So what is the future of this league? These ticket prices, you can look at it a couple of different ways. You can say, I'm just going to buy from the secondary market. The secondary market is never going to change. It's not going to get shut down. This isn't the Masters. The Masters has a secondary market. Or, or I'm going to give the contribution and sit in the same seats every time. I don't, I think that is the dichotomy that was coming 15 years ago and is here now. And that's the part that Georgia's going to have to figure out. Which of these games would you go to? Would you go to Auburn for $275? Would you go to the Georgia Ole Miss game, visiting Red Zone ahead of time on Clayton Street for $279, for $297? You'd get value at. I can tell you can get value at Red Zone on Clayton Street. These tickets, I don't know if these are great value or not. Alabama at Georgia for $465, or Texas at Georgia for $566. You tell me. The other thing I will add about these prices, all anyone is going to care about in the future is the playoff. The SEC championship game is going to feel this, and it's going to hurt the playoff as well. But there is a finite amount of money that people have, unfortunately. And, there's only so much elasticity in the market. And, you can only play so many big games. Just off the top of my head, that's 600, 900. So this is about 2 G's. This costs you, just for one ticket, it's going to cost you about 2 G's to see Auburn, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Alabama, and Texas play Georgia. So that's $2,000. Let's just call it $4,000 for all those tickets for you and Mary. Y'all are going to go to all the games. And then, of course, you've got travel. For some of them, you have travel, which means hotel. So this is probably going to cost you, if you're going to see Georgia play all those games and Florida and Tech, you're probably looking at 5 G's. And for some people, that's not that much money. And that's fine for them. But that 5 G's is gone. And if they're playing in Dallas, you don't get to recoup the $5,000 that you spent watching all the regular season games. Now, there's a lot of Georgia fans. I can attest to that. That is a true statement. But it's the elasticity here that I think I'd be a little bit concerned about. Which one would you go to? Thanks for watching.